Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the ESA webinar series. Thanks for joining us this morning. Very happy to have Ian Wilson with us from the Saskatchewan Research Council, who's heading up their accelerated site closure program. So he's going to have lots of information for you on that. Just a reminder that you can find a copy of the presentation and the recording of the webinar later today, hopefully when the video is processed, at esa.org/webinars. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, ERIS Environmental Risk Information Services. ERIS has been providing critical risk and historical information on properties in Canada since 1999. In 2013, they added US coverage, and in 2017, Mexico coverage. So for complete information, reach out to the team and our great supporters over at erisinfo.com. So thank you to them for their support. Reminder that EnviroTech is going to be virtual again this year because of our ongoing COVID fund. So check out esa.org/EnviroTech for the call for abstracts. There's some sponsorship opportunities available, and we've again kept it really low price to maximize the number of people there. We would really appreciate your support. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ian. Ian's talk is about 25 minutes because he figures there'll be lots of questions, and that'll leave us lots of time for Q&A after. So Ian, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll pop back in when you're done. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. So once again, thanks everybody for having me. My name is Ian Wilson. I'm a business unit manager at Saskatchewan Research Council, as well as the program lead for Saskatchewan's Accelerated Site Closure Program. So I'll take you through what is a pretty general presentation, and happy to answer as many questions as I can generated from this talk. So the agenda for what I'm going to speak about, I'll provide a quick program overview, program eligibility, vendor assessment, packaging process, work package agreement, service delivery, and something that we've put in recently, Indigenous inclusion, and then hopefully leave time for lots of questions. So program overview, this program is a $400 million federally funded program for the abandonment and reclamation of inactive oil and gas wells and facilities in Saskatchewan. It's scheduled to run until December 31st, 2022. The primary purpose of this program is to put Saskatchewan people and companies back to work in the struggling oil and gas service sector here that we're experiencing in Saskatchewan, and I think within Canada and Western Canada in particular. It's overseen by the Saskatchewan Ministry of Energy and Resources and administered by ourselves, Saskatchewan Research, with program procurement partners with SAS Builds, as well as we've entered into an agreement recently with the Indigenous side with First Nations Center of Excellence. This is a primary economic stimuli package. So it is there to stimulate Saskatchewan-based oil service companies, i.e. the vendors, and that's first and foremost. It's estimated that up to 8,000 inactive wells and facilities will be abandoned and reclaimed. So that's the secondary purpose, to get as much work done as we can. And approximately 2,100 full-time equivalents either created or maintained on the program over the shelf life. It's rolled out in several phases. The first phase, which we just sort of closed out at the end of this calendar year, was $100 million. We're now in phase 2, which is $200 million, and we are going to have approximately $100 million left over for the third phase to the completion of the program. The funding is directed to the oil service companies and not to the licensees or the oil company. So that's important. That was one of the stipulations in the federal government term sheets for the funding. So program eligibility, licensees who are in good standing with the Saskatchewan government in relation to debts owing to the Crown are able to participate within the program. The allocation is established by considering the eligible licensee's total deemed inactive infrastructure liability within the province as a percentage of the total deemed inactive infrastructure liability of all of the eligible licensees that are in the province. And so that's really, it's a proportional calculation. Licensees will receive a minimum funding allocation of $50,000 to support reclamation and abandonment activities in any one phase. Eligible program activities include abandonment of oil and gas wells, facilities, and associated flow lines, environmental site assessment, i.e. phase 1 and phase 2s, site remediation activities, and site reclamation activities. Also, a part of the program is we do procurement and vendor assessments, and we do that by dividing those vendors in Saskatchewan into both major and minor oil field service providers, i.e. the companies or the vendors. Our project partner, SAS Builds, conducts a two-stage request for supplier qualifications, or an RFSQ process, to determine what and who are those major contractors or major vendors on the program. And that two-stage program includes a Saskatchewan-based assessment. That is really stage 1. Are they Saskatchewan-based? Do they have the majority or major components of their organization in Saskatchewan? If they go through that and it's determined that they do, then they go to stage 2, where we assess pricing, capability and capacity, and safety records of that vendor. Major vendors are defined if they have internal capacity to complete any one of the service types. So rig service, site supervisor, coil tubing, wireline, fluid hauling and disposal, cut and cap, pressure testing, cementation and service maintenance, downhole tools, initial EAs, detailed site EAs, environmental contracting, engineering and project management, and reclamation, remediation, and ARs. So it's both on the downhole abandonment and on the REMREC side. And once again, we determine who a major vendor is if they have internal capacity to do one or multiple of these service types within the program. So minor vendors, so anyone that doesn't have internal capacity to do that, are termed minor vendors, and they can participate in the program if they are Saskatchewan-based. Major vendors are given opportunities to align pricing with industry means if they initially, the proposals aren't within that alignment. So what that means is we take some of the pricing that are provided by those major vendors, we take a mean or a benchmark with any one service type, and then we go out to the first standard deviation. If those companies within their benchmark prices, those major contractors fit within that, then they are deemed accessible and can, I guess, participate in the program. We give them a couple of rights of refusal to align their pricing. We don't tell them what those are, and allow them to do that. That way they can participate. So non-competitive major vendors will not be used, and only if there are no other competitive vendors. So even if they don't have competitive pricing, they still may participate in the program if we have capacity issues and everybody else is being utilized. It's like having a starting lineup in football. These are the bench warmers, and they may go in if we have time and opportunity to do so. So program assesses current oil field service vendors only and will not assess cross-industry proposals. So this really, because it's an economic stimuli package for oil and gas vendors, we are not looking at any other cross-pollination from other industries, forestry, heavy civil, or mining. So one of the things that SRC does is we put together the packages that we send out within the program. So licensees nominate sites and activities using the Ministry of Energy and Resources, IRIS system, and we ask them to put 125% allocation. So we have some flexibility on what sites and activities that we package. So SRC downloads this information from IRIS. Then we work with the licensees to co-develop an area-based work package, adding both sites and activities with, I guess, aligned qualified major vendors and the cost estimations from the stage 2 RSFQ. SRC then sends those packages out via legal agreements with the licensees. And we have two types. We have one where the licensees act as the prime contractor, i.e. the licensee has enough internal capacity that they can manage everything themselves. And this is primary for the larger and mid-sized licensees. We do have a secondary legal agreement and a work package where if a licensee doesn't have the internal capacity, then they can put a prime contractor in and to act on their behalf. So the work package agreements themselves, like I said, there's two types. The first one, the licensees as lead contractors. This is where the work packages and agreements are signed off by SRC and the licensee. All work by contractors within the licensee as a lead contractor, and for the large, medium-sized licensees that have in-house capacity. The signed prime contractor as lead packages, this is where they don't have that in-house capacity and generally are sort of smaller in nature. So the service delivery within these packages, licensees self-perform the work packages. They sign off on the verified vendor invoices, and they send those invoices to SRC for payment. Once again, no money within the program can go directly to the licensees, and so this is the process that we use that was already out there in order to facilitate payment to the service vendors. SRCs reviews all the invoices against the SaaS builds and program requirements before directly paying those vendors. SRC manages and cost tracks the completed work against the terms and conditions of the legal agreement. So once again, we have the legal agreement with the licensees, and it's generally pretty vanilla, and we have had uptake with almost all the major licensees, but we do, that is the leveraging tool that we do have to make sure that the program is being facilitated properly. So there is built-in facilities within those agreements for both parties, and we use something called a change direction mechanism to add or remove sites or adjust for actual pricing against the estimated that are provided to us. All the data inputted into a central integrated data management system that SRC has built in, and it's built specific for this program. And we've taken some of our data engineers and put in quite robust both QC and AI tools to help us, do things quicker and more effectively. All information reported monthly to the Ministry of Energy and Resources as part of the program requirements. So I apologize, it's a bit of a busy slide, and hopefully you can see my cursor. So the process that I just outlined, it starts with the licensees. The licensees, they take their wells, their flow lines, their service or their surfaces, their facilities, all the REM-REC stuff, they put it into the Ministry of Energy and Resources IRIS system, i.e. this is the nomination process. We then work with them and we put together work packages from the data submitted from IRIS. We make sure that the licensee are happy with that and it fits within the program requirements. We then put that in a legal contractual agreement, which is signed by both ourselves as a SRC and the licensees. It goes back to the licensees. They self-perform the work as they would normally outside of the program. And SRC tags in again where the licensee signs off on the invoices that are generated as part of the program. They then send it to SRC where we then pay the service contractors within 30 days or better. Along the way, once again, we gather data and intel from the licensees to perform cost and performance reviews against the program and the requirements, which then allows us to do federal and provincial reporting and some of the financials that are required. As I said, we have closed out phase 2 or phase 1, and we're currently in phase 2. And something new in phase 2 that we've put in are Indigenous inclusion 2 pools and 2 provisions to do that. And the objective or the why that we're doing this is to take the tangible and measurable actions on growth plan commitments to increase Indigenous participation in Saskatchewan's natural resource economy, to action strategic priorities, i.e. securing Indigenous participation consistently identified by all divisions as having a major impact on resource development in the next 5 years. So something that we recognize this is something that we can grow on. To establish relationships with Indigenous governments, governance, communities, leadership, as well as some of the businesses across the province in relation to resource development. Once again, something that we want to grow, and to ensure that Indigenous-owned service companies and Indigenous communities are included in the program. And as an overview, to ensure that the Indigenous communities and businesses benefit from the program, we've introduced two pools of money. The first is the First Nations Stewardship Fund, and the second is the Indigenous Business Credit Pool. And these two initiatives will direct up to $50 million, so 50 of 400, into these two pools of money for Indigenous participation. The First Nations Resource Center of Excellence will be helping us administer these two pools of money. So the first one is the First Nations Stewardship Fund, and the Stewardship Fund will allocate up to $20 million in program funding to conduct abandonment and reclamation activities on First Nations communities in Saskatchewan. So this is primarily on any of those wells or sites that are on reserve. And the eligible licensees with oil and gas sites on reserve can access this stewardship fund and are asked to nominate sites that they do hold on here, as well as any surface locations on or partially off the reserve for a consideration. So we ask them for a wish list. And licensees will engage with First Nations communities in the development of this work package under the stewardship. So as part of this, the licensees put together their wish list of those sites that they wish to close out on reserve. We then, as well as Center of Excellence, work with the leadership of the First Nations to make sure the sites on the wish lists are the ones that the leadership of the reserve want to close out. And we put together that into a package. The other pool is across the board. It doesn't have to be necessarily on First Nations. And it's the Aboriginal and Indigenous Credit Pool. And it's created to incentivize ASCP licensees to work with eligible Indigenous major contractors and minor contractors to complete program work. And for each dollar spent on eligible Indigenous contractors, licensees will receive 50 cents back on that dollar that they can then use on the remainder of the program. The Indigenous Business Credit Pool will make an additional $50 million in ASCP funding available for participation on this pool. If fully utilized, the Indigenous Business Credits Pool will support approximately $30 million on the spend to qualified Indigenous businesses. So that is a very brief overview of Saskatchewan's ASCP program, and I'll open up the floor to any questions.
Thanks, Ian, for that quick overview. Now it's question time. We left a lot of time for questions on purpose, so feel free to type them in the question box. We'll get to as many as we can. While we wait, Ian, you and I were discussing your uranium. Your other side of your hat, your other hat is your uranium cleanup profile. Maybe give everyone just a quick update and where they can go for more info.
Sure. The other portfolio and program that I manage is within Saskatchewan. It's called Project Cleans. And what it is 37 former legacy uranium mine and mill sites up primarily in northwestern Saskatchewan. And we have, taken that over once again on behalf of the Saskatchewan Ministry of Energy and Resources. And we're in various stages within the 37 sites. Our two large sites that have tailings, the Laredo Mill site, that one is done. And we are doing post-remediation monitoring. Everything looks like it's going as was designed. Eventually, we'll like to put that into a provincial institutional control program. Our other, largest site, the Gunner Mine and Mill Complex, we are nearly done the building of the engineered cover systems over the three tailings areas. The biggest thing, unfortunately, with COVID, we've had to deal with that, and so it's put a wrench in some of our plans, but we were still able to get quite a bit of work done last year within COVID protocols. The other thing, unfortunately, is we've also had a 1 to 70-year high water level mark that we've had to deal with. So we're dealing with a flood and a COVID, but we were still able to do quite a bit of work. And we're going to continue to do work. Right now, we're building ice roads as these sites are, there's no, roads outside of winter ice roads that we can access the site. So we're building ice roads and we're getting ready to do our logistic load for the year and hopefully open it up with COVID safe protocols. And even with the high water level in Lake Athabasca, it's still business as normal. Some of our other smaller, I guess, non-tailing sites, we're going to continue to, I guess, assess, design remediation tools and implement. We got about 10 of those sites completely done and ready for institutional control program. And those sites were determined based on a lot of safety and risk considerations closer to populated areas or areas where they're, I guess, used for traditional purposes. And we're starting to go further out of field where a lot of times, these sites haven't been accessed in 20, 30 years. And hopefully, over the next 10 years, put these 37 sites to bed.
Great, that's a great overview. So is there a website people can go to for info on that or just search?
Yeah, you can either Google search Project Cleans, so that's Project Cleans, CLEANS, or you can go on the Saskatchewan Research Council's website and it will bring information from that main website. Yeah.
Okay, great. A few questions here on the presentation and webinar availability. So again, late today, ESAA.org/webinars, you'll find a copy of the PowerPoint as a PDF and the recording. So is there an Indigenous list of service vendors available?
There is, and if you go on to the Center of Excellence, they have a database and they've been managing this. It's called exportdata.ca, and licensees can go on and look at the verified vendors, Saskatchewan-based Indigenous vendors, as well as any vendors that would like to participate if they are Indigenous can then go through that portal. So that's exportdata.ca.
Okay, great. That's a great resource. Will the government of Saskatchewan or the program publish the amount of the Indigenous credit pool that has been utilized and or is remaining?
We are giving that out in, I guess, two tiers. Those licensees that have more than $650,000 of deemed liability, they will be allocated the Indigenous credit pool to them directly. Any licensees that have less than $650,000, we do it by application. And right now, we don't have that published. And that's something that I'd have to circle back to the program holder, Ministry of Energy and Resources. Most likely they may do that, but right now it's only provided for those licensees that have more than $650,000. Everything else is by application.
Okay. Is there a list of approved analytical laboratories? There seems to be some misconception regarding their requirements as approved vendors or not. Clarification might help.
Yeah, so analytic, you'll notice, and maybe I'll go back to my slide. For those vendors that would be major vendors, hopefully everybody can see this. So you'll notice that if we go down to the 14 major service types that constitute what a major vendor is, we do not have analytical labs. Analytical labs would be a minor vendor. And so within pricing and within accessibility to the program, as long as they're Saskatchewan-based, analytical labs are counted as a minor vendor. So they don't have to go through the stage 1 or stage 2 RSFQ. Minor vendors only have to be deemed Saskatchewan-based.
What's the definition of Saskatchewan-based?
Saskatchewan-based is if they have major holdings, and a lot of times we try to use numerics, employees or major holdings, 85% of that, I guess, vendor type. The one, I guess, little blip that we have is in Lloydminster. We do look and within city limits, any any vendors that have their offices in Lloydminster would then also be deemed eligible for the program.
Okay. How will Indigenous nations be contacted to participate?
So right now, our project partner, the First Nations Center of Excellence, they are actually owned by each of the 74 First Nations and report to them. And Center of Excellence will continue to, I guess, work with First Nations leadership to make sure that there's that say when developing any of the on reserve lists prior to us packaging it.
Okay. Where can a licensee find out their credit pool amount?
Their credit pool amount will be determined, once again, if they have holdings in Saskatchewan of more than $650,000 on the program, they can go directly to the Saskatchewan Ministry of Energy and Resources, as they're the ones that are calculating that. Anybody or any licensees that have under that $650,000, we've contacted for application, and that application needs to be filled out and sent to SRC, and it's first come, first serve on that.
Okay, this is a somewhat long one, so I'll try to break it up as we can. So can you give some clarity on prime contractor contracts with SRC? The slide with the boxes depicted a relationship direct with the licensee and SRC. Where does the prime sit there?
Yeah, so as I had mentioned, we have two types of contracts. It's where the licensee is lead, and I'm going to suggest, this is sort of 95% of how the industry is working. And for most of the industry, definitely the large and medium sized, we have a work package agreement directly with that licensees. They would act as that prime or lead. It's only when we have some of these very, very small licensees or oil companies that don't have the in-house capacity to act as lead, that in that case, we would give them a list of Saskatchewan-based contractors that could, I guess, fill that role. And then we would have a co-signed agreement between that licensees and the prime contractor, which they would select for that purpose.
Okay. Are prime contractors considered major service category, or are they in the 14?
We don't use the prime contractor. We don't use that nomenclature. That's more of a safety. We use site supervisor, and that's probably, I guess, more indicative of what and how we're using it. And a site supervisor or site representative is definitely within those 14 major service types.
Okay, and then are there specific criteria for the prime contractors?
Once again, we don't use prime contractors. It's not something that we use within the program. Once again, I'll say the best analogy would be those owner reps or site supervisors. And yes, because they constitute one of those 14 major service types, they have to go through both stage 1 and stage 2 to be admissible in the program through SaskBuild's RSFQ process. So they have to go through a public procurement process for them to be utilized on the program. And any major vendor within those other 13 service types as well.
Okay. How does it work for companies that have Saskatchewan and Alberta offices? Do employees working on the program need to come from the Saskatchewan offices?
They do. Once again, this is primarily a Saskatchewan-based economic stimuli package. And, and we have a lot of companies that have trans-border offices, but we would ask them to, when they're applying as a major contractor, to remove that Saskatchewan-centric and put that forward so we can properly evaluate. We actually do audit, and we do check to make sure that the money is going primarily to Saskatchewan vendors. And in many cases, where we find it doesn't, we remove that contractor from the program.
Okay. Have all licensees with the greater than 650,000 funding been allocated their Indigenous credit pool?
Based on my understanding, once again, SRC doesn't manage this aspect, but based on my understanding, yes, Ministry of Energy and Resources, who does this calculation, has notified each of the applicable licensees with their liability, or sorry, with their amount based on their liability holdings of over $650,000. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Follow up on the lab question. As a minor vendor, labs have to have 85% of their company based in Saskatchewan. How does it work if analysis are going to out of province for testing?
Once again, I guess not a simple answer. We use an analogy similar to an orchestra. If the orchestra can't play because we have a couple instruments missing, and if those instruments have to come from Alberta to allow the orchestra to play, then we look at it sort of from that more of a qualitative standpoint than anything.
Okay.
On a and or basis, in many cases, they would put that forward. We would evaluate that. If there's no in-house capacity for anything in Saskatchewan, then we would evaluate and allow, I guess, others from outside of province to allow that. Once again, going back to the primary focus of, we don't want to hold up work and hold up work going to those vendors if there's no Saskatchewan-based capacity.
Right. Can you give an example of a minor subcontractor being used outside of the 85% rule that isn't a lab per se, not a lab? So
yeah, we haven't had any instances of minor vendors where we've used outside. Most of it has been major vendors. The one instance that I can think of off the top of my head is when and I'm a REMREC guy, so I might get this wrong. When they're removing some of the well casing, in many cases, there's a high water jet that Saskatchewan doesn't have. So the high water jet will cut and remove the well, and there was no capacity in Saskatchewan for that. It's more intrinsically safe, and so an Alberta company came and did that. The other one that we did find is a certain ground penetrating radar, and this might go into the minor, where we didn't find any Saskatchewan-based capacity for this specific ground penetrating radar, and it did come from Alberta. So once again, on a case-by-case basis.
Right. Okay. Did we touch on this? When will the licensees be made aware of the Indigenous stewardship allocations?
We've talked with most of the licensees through multiple town halls for the last 3 or 4 months doing that. So in many cases, they should be aware. We've held multiple town hall meetings discussing it, as well as going through sort of industry and licensees group. So yeah, we've been sort of broadcasting this for the last 2 or 3 months now.
Okay. What if you're a major vendor that doesn't qualify as a Saskatchewan based, but are doing work with minor vendors who are? Is there a method for us to qualify for funding for our minor vendors, and then the licensees would cover the cost for us, which is a small component of the overall project cost?
Yeah, so simple answer is, if any company is determined to fully be a major vendor through capacity of each of those 14 service types, the program will not pay them money unless they fully go through stage 1 and stage 2 of the procurement process, whether they're used in a primary, secondary, or tertiary role. So if that way we don't have companies trying to sneak in through the back door in many cases. We have allowed licensees, any, I guess, major contractors that haven't gone through and are not Saskatchewan based, we've made it very clear to the licensees, you guys are happy to use anybody you want, but from a major vendor standpoint, we cannot pay unless they fully go through the stage 1 and stage 2 RSFQ program.
Okay. Is there, this one's from me, is there any areas of like gaps that you see that need to be filled that the companies can look to, to submit proposals or something along those lines?
Yeah, I would just say, I think we got most of the awareness out. I would ask that any Saskatchewan-based Indigenous contractors, either major or minor, go through Center of Excellence. I'd like to get a bit more of a robust list going as quickly as I can. The only other major item I would say, and you know, it's pretty tough because once again, you know, this is only a 2-year program. We're finding quite a bit of delta lag time between all the packages issued and the work being done. A lot of it's seasonal effect, a lot of it's others. But I'm just, you know, I'm always nervous, and my biggest bugbear is to make sure I spend all of the $400 million of the program within the time period going to Saskatchewan vendors. So being able to mitigate that I guess delta between issued and actual is always going to be a struggle.
Right. Okay, one more. Can major service categories sub through other major service categories to simplify processes?
They can, as long as both of those majors have fully gone through and are verified in the program, as long as they submit separate rates and separate invoices. What we don't want is we don't want one major vendor sending their rates through another where we can't see it because they have been verified based on their rates. As long as they I guess have separate invoices with the agreed upon rates that are clearly defined.
Okay. And another one. Are licensees allowed to select their own vendors to complete work on their sites?
We have let them do that. We haven't really interfered. You know, as a government, we try to be as organic as possible. If we do find that certain, I guess, regions or certain vendors or vendor types are being underutilized, we may step in, once again, because this is a economic stimuli package for the vendors versus the licensees, but we haven't done that to date.
Okay. Is there a website for the program, or did I miss it on the slides? Or
yeah, you can go to the Ministry of Energy and Resources and their website, Saskatchewan Ministry of Energy and Resources, and they should have a clickable link there to the ASCP program.
Okay, I will put that up on when I post the recording and the presentation. I'll put a link up to that for everyone as well. So Ian, that's it for questions. I appreciate this. Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to provide us a quick update and answer some questions. Really appreciate that. Big shout out to our sponsor, ERIS Environmental Risk Information Services. Thanks to Brian and the team over there for your support. For complete information about ERIS and the services they provide, check them out at erisinfo.com. So thanks for that. Reminder about Envirotech, check it out at esa.org/envirotech. And once again, the webinar recording will be online at esa.org/webinars later day. So thank you everyone for your attention and joining us today. And thank you again, Ian, and everyone. Stay safe and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.